One thing I wanted to do today is watch some of the videos about the most recent uh, Edison changes. And I wanted to watch Sunny's because Sunny is smart rather than just watch a YouTuber's.
I'm going to
Pre-watch
make
jump scare. I thumbed through it a little bit.
this video because a lot of players have very negative feelings about the recent Ultimate Time Wizard announcement, and I don't want to invalidate anyone's feelings. If you're unhappy about the changes, I think that's completely valid, and there are definitely concerns about the recent policy.
And to be clear, I do want to invalidate other people's opinions.
However, I think there are actually quite a few benefits that could arise from this change. I usually don't like to speak about credentials because I don't think anyone needs to have them in order to have a good discussion, but I thought I would speak on behalf of those who are optimistic about these changes as someone who not only has a more competitive background, but also played back during actual Edison format.
Real quick, I do want to say, I both played during actual Edison format and am way more competitively practiced than Sunny. The problem is that I've gotten unlucky 100,000 times. Oh my god, wait, the Give Joseph Money train is giving out golden kappas. By the way, that shit is really funny that they're doing that the day after everyone gave 1 trillion subs.
Try not to mention this, but I was receiving some pushback from people in comments who say that I'm an OCG player who wouldn't know anything about Edison. I never wanted to be known as an OCG player. I have been actively playing Edison since its revival in 2021, and I'm also currently the winner of RBET Rulers 2024, which is commonly regarded as the Edison World Championship and the most difficult tournament of each year.
Okay, wait. The most difficult Edison tournament of the year, I think we can all agree, is Dream Wizards Locals, which I've won a couple of times. So that actually invalidates that.
Most of the advantages of the changes will be concerning newer and returning players, but I will also talk about the disadvantages of the decision near the end of the video. For clarity, I will sometimes be referring to the current rulings and errata versions of Edison as Advanced Edison. A majority of people's concern, to my understanding, is primarily based on historical accuracy and principle. That's understandable. Removing priority and shifting cards to erratas is scary, but in a way, I think this change may be functionally getting us closer to historical accuracy.
Okay, I'm skipping this part because I don't care about it. I understand that a lot of people are like, listen, it's very important for accuracy reasons that we play it exactly the way that it was played historically. I don't think that's true at all. And I think that people that are using that as their primary argument as to why the existing like rule shift is a bad thing are totally misguided and setting themselves up to totally lose the argument, because who cares about historical accuracy? You know, we're not playing historically relevant Dandy Warrior mirrors. You know, we're playing a weird amalgamation of 50 different things. And, you know, God forbid there's like SJC prize cards in everyone's decks.
Additionally, without talking about the meta or decks, most of the changes are related to rulings. A lot of top players I talked to made fun of me for this. But yes, I think rulings are genuinely the things that matter less to returning players. These are by far the easiest things to forget. There were a ton of rulings I forgot when I returned to Edison. I didn't know that Ryko targeted first and milled afterwards. I didn't know that Aaron didn't negate flips. Like, some of these things may seem obvious, but that's because we have been playing for so many years now. I feel like a lot of Edison players have almost forgotten what it was like back in the day, or even their experience when they first started playing again. The internet was a lot more primitive back in 2010. It's not a guarantee you had a ruling expert at your locals back then. I remember we would just ask around and hope one of the better players knew how it worked. And sometimes they wouldn't know either. You can say maybe I went to a bum locals back in 2010, but I feel like it's unlikely every locals had a judge level individual. It's not like today where we can look things up on the Edison website. And Edison does have a lot of jank rulings that are pretty arbitrary because there were no problem solving card decks back then. There's another reason for this ruling change. Konami probably implemented this change because it's hard to train judges for Edison. I know it feels like Time Wizard judges should know Edison rulings, but the reality is that a lot of the time they don't. Everyone has a ruling story at these tournaments. I have multiple. For example, at YCS Philly in 2023, my judge told me I can't combo Soul Exchange with Substitute because Soul Exchange says Tribute Summon, even though no copy of Soul Exchange has ever been printed to say that. So I'm just -1 for fun, and I'm missing my normal summon as well. When you go to a Time Wizard event, it's genuinely gambling your rulings, and that means making uniform rulings would be a benefit not only for logistics, but also for player confidence. My last reason.
So I think that's... this is, in my opinion, the best argument for the change, is that it empowers judges to be able to consistently rule on things. And I think a lot of people kind of paper over this sort of belief in the importance of having a judge staff that is knowledgeable about the Edison rule space by being like, well, they should know it. Like, it's super popular. And like, think about the reality of the situation at YCS level events, right? The way the Time Wizard events are run isn't like they're like, today we're running Time Wizard 2010. So if you want a 2010 flight, show up and do a 2010 flight. They say, we're running Time Wizard flights. Show up, tell us your preferred format, and we will get a pod together for you. So it's not that judges have to know Edison, it's that judges have to technically be able to know every single format that's ever happened. Now, this is at odds with the reality of the situation, which is that if you ever go to a YCS, what you'll experience is there's like 4 GOAT pods that fire, 1,000 Edison pods that fire, and one Tengu pod that fires, and then there's a couple of extras that fire as like people who came with an 8 stack decide they want a meme. Like Caleb.exe will bring the Nimbugs to play Meadowlands, or like maybe some rando will run July or 2018 Firewall formats as a gag. But I think this is an argument for running Time Wizard differently and just being like, we will be hosting 2010 Time Wizard at this, not an argument for completely overhauling the rulings for the benefit of judges that are still going to be fucked under this situation. You're going to get a lot of people mad at them. Additionally, I think it's a little infantilizing, right? Or to think that judges won't be able to learn stuff like the Edison rulings. Like, it would be so much easier than all this rigmarole for Konami to just put out a list of rulings that impact Edison. EdisonFormat.com has a list of rulings that impact Edison that they could just put, like, they could standardize right now and hand to judges before they judge an Edison event. I don't know.
And for why I don't think the ruling change is as bad as people are expressing is because people already do not get upset about the ruling changes we have now. For example, we will accept wrong rulings that everyone agrees are wrong or bad for gameplay just because we found a random Pojo post that said a judge ruled it wrong at the time. Everyone knows Quick Draw Special shouldn't start a chain, but we changed it because a judge ruled it incorrectly at SJC Edison.
All right, that's a pretty good point.
We changed the literal mascot of the format when no one wanted that either. Just 2 days ago, there was a discussion that Machina Fortress and Summon should also start a chain because there was evidence that it was ruled that way at SJC Edison. If we follow historical accuracy, we would let you crow Machina Fortress, which I'm sure would devastate the Machina players, hence why people are against this change. During the revival of Edison, Gozen and Rivalry worked the way they do now. It took about a year before we figured out the ruling we currently use for Edison. Mindcrush is randomly forced to reveal during Keegan's tournaments because he likes that ruling more. The rules we use for tournaments are already the things that we're comfortable with changing, just not when Konami tries to implement the change. Now I want to have a discussion about what the actual format is like. I don't actually think this is the most important discussion regarding the policy change.
So I do. This is the weird one for me. I guess I sort of exist in a different position than most people online in that I think that things like removing prio and adding erratas, the downside to those is that it will have a negative impact on the format, right? I don't really give a shit about preserving like the integrity of having ignition effect priority. I want the format to be like fun, if that makes sense. I think there's a ton of formats that do have the old rulings priority, you know, and ignition effect priority, and cards have to remain in the same place as their trigger location would have been at end of chain, that are terrible. Like, look at Teledad. No one wants to play Teledad. I think the importance of Edison is that it is a fun format that is extremely diverse, and the difference in between decks isn't super pronounced. And what scares me is that a, quote, advanced Edison format, end quote, would fuck that up.
My reasons are primarily focused on the new and returning player experience, but I do genuinely think the format might just be more consistent than the Edison we play today. For me, one of the most annoying things about Edison's development over time is that the power level has been increasing as people build more and more to sacrifice consistency for power. Whenever the format of a power outclasses the defense, then it tends to be pretty stressful to play because it creates an arms race where you're incentivized to push earlier as opposed to calculated risk with efficient trading. And a lot of these changes are related to this exact issue, which makes sense because if a card got eroded, it was likely being abused in some way. So here, I have the majority of the important changes. I've categorized the ones in the main deck as changes that I think are good for skill expression, the ones in the side deck as bad changes, and then the extra deck as good or negligible extra deck changes.
You're not putting Ab-Zero in the negligible extra deck? Come on.
The first one is that frogs are undoubtedly worse now. Treeborn only being a soft once per turn is the biggest issue by far because it just means Royal Oppression stops it now, which makes Royal Oppression good against every part of the frog engine. Substitute also loses priority. As a devoted frog player, I probably summoned Substitute the second most of anyone in history, and honestly, I think this is a good change. It never really made sense that Substitute call priority was safe in everything except for Solemn and Oppression. The risk reward on the card was incredibly skewed towards the frog player, and I think most players are happy about this change because the vast majority of players don't like playing against frog, and frog also invalidated a lot of rogue decks because a lot of decks could not handle +1s every turn or break a 2-block, especially since frog is a meta working deck that requires a majority of most players' side decks, so it makes it hard to prepare for all the other top meta decks in the format. Second would be this row of cards that are affected by the loss of priority. It stops important starters.
I don't know. I guess the argument would be, do you think a deck as powerful as frogs, or an engine as powerful as frogs, I assume, is valuable as like a meter stick for the format? Like, something's going to have to keep the rogue decks down. You know, if it's not going to be frogs, it's going to be something a little further down the ladder in terms of power level. Personally, I was comfortable with frogs eating rogue decks lunch.
And bombs, but I think this is a good change as well. These are the top complaints from Edison players about the format. You can play a clean game, tight resource management, flawless trading, and then they top Dark Arm Dragon and they kill you. More importantly for this change is that defense gets stronger. I've listed these 4 cards here, but there are more. Book of Moon, Compulse, Raigeki Break, and Trapple. Some players are talking as if a buff to these cards would be bad, and I don't understand because these are cards that are underpowered right now and are pretty healthy cards in terms of gameplay.
I don't think Compulse is particularly healthy.
Book of Moon should be one of the best cards in a retro format because of its multi-purpose flexibility. It can dodge brain control, it can stop attacks, it can protect your own monster from their trap cards, it can stop synchros. By all account, Book of Moon should be a good card, but because it is -1 and it interacts horrible with the top decks of the format, since it is unable to stop critical useful effects, then it has almost completely fallen out of meta. You'll occasionally see decks that Lucid Dyna and Vanity Fiend side some copies, or you might see them in Blackwings or GBs. But aside from those decks, they aren't really played anymore. I was actually one of the first to not play Book of Moon in Edison back when I cut every copy from my topping fairy list. Book of Moon, Compulse, and discard traps should have stronger utility because they are already balanced by being -1 cards, but they don't because priority makes it so that power plays are still game winning whether you have chainable defense or not. Brain control is also an errata that I think is misrepresented. Brain is one of the most hated cards in Edison. The brain to win rate conversion percentage is very high.
That is true. Isn't Minecon out by this point? Yeah. Minecon is like the version of BrainCon that doesn't make me want to jump.
High. Some players are talking about Brain as being bad now. That's not true at all. Very rarely was Brain used to steal an actual boss monster in the context of an actual Edison game. It did happen, but most of the time you were stealing something that is still a target now. And even if you had a conversion for Brain in the past, then you still have a conversion for that Brain control target today. Brain Caius will still break every single board in the format except for lone boss monster boards. Future Fusion is a problem. Some players who say Future Fusion is not a problem, I feel like don't play enough Edison. It's really only essential for Diva Hero and then decks that treat it as Exodia.
But I like Diva Hero.
I don't think that's great design. If you're a Jinzo lover, it's unfortunate that your Jinzo DK doesn't work anymore, but it also wasn't great that these types of decks literally did nothing without Future Fusion and then would one-shot you if they drew Future Fusion. That's pretty bad deck design in my opinion. Jinzo, Dragon Turbo, Dark Calling, Roids, other decks would also play it such as Hero Beat or Hero Frog, but it was absolutely not essential to either one of these decks. Even back in the day, the first time I saw Future Fusion reveal 5 God Dragons, send 3 Wyverns, and Red MD, I thought that was breaking the game, and no one even debates this. Every single person who plays a Future Fusion deck agrees that Future Fusion is not balanced. The last changes up here are just fixing quick draw.
I mean, this would just be... I don't know. I feel like a significant amount of Sunny's perspective here is just a difference in opinion in what decks are allowed to do. Like, I think decks are allowed to have a totally above the board, like, way broken individual card in a deck that's otherwise unremarkable. Like, the Jinzo deck isn't like Tenpai, where like every single game is exactly the same and every single combo goes exactly the same. It's you are playing a really bad deck, and the payoff is you get one really cool high roll card. Like, I think that's all right. And I guess if you want Edison to be more about it, you know, it might. This is a position where Sunny's rhetorical perspective, positioning rather, as like a top player may be a detriment to them. Because I think it's really good when bad players can take games off good players on the back of cards that are way too powerful. Like, I think that adds an interesting element to a game that's otherwise functionally chess. And it's for that reason that I like cards like Dad and Future Fusion and JD and shit like that.
Draw, Machina Fortress, and Mind Crush. Machina Fortress hasn't been changed in Edison yet, but based on the Pojo forum found by Bori, it does look like it should be ruled the same as Quick Draw. For the extra deck, Colossal Arm is fun to do for sure, but it's definitely one of the ways lost games are stolen. Konami removed it because it is breaking the game. This is the first 50k in the game that punished you.
Okay, to be clear, is Colossal Arm changed? I was under the impression that the Hidden Arsenal print unchanged it, which would be its current errata. But I mean, again, I could be wrong about it. I do agree that Colossal Arm is definitely should not be in the format. Like, that, it is ridiculous.
For trying to play the game normally and committing a semi-large monster. Fish is one of my favorite decks of all time, but I think a lot of people agree with me that Colossal Arm is pretty toxic.
Yeah, no.
Ancient Fairy Dragon is negligible. No deck was seriously playing it for its effect except for KFC, and I play more KFC than anyone in the world. Every other deck just uses it as a 3000 defense chump blocker.
If they use it at all.
Absolute Zero is nerfed, which is probably good. Right now, counterplay against Absolute Zero is just not to commit too many monsters against hero decks. Having removal options in the form of Brinac, Compulse, or Wing Blast is probably good because it means you can push against hero decks with some sort of efficient counterplay, and the Absolute Zero is still a power play that will go even in card advantage except against suppression.
I don't know, I just feel like every hero deck just fundamentally, or all the you know, hero decks that are playing Miracle just rely so much on Absolute Zero that, like, the trap lineup changing in such a capacity that they eat alive critters that... The way the trap lineup is changing, stuff like Compulse becoming more powerful, bodes poorly for hero in a world where also this change goes through. Like, what I'm concerned about isn't, like, now people have counterplay to Abs Hero, but instead, now hero decks are not playable.
But of course, there are also bad changes. The first one is the deletion of Goyo. Everyone hates this. The only way to make it are with psychic
Oh, man. I'll be completely honest with you here. I think I would still be upset. But I think if they printed Goyo with no Earth Tuner, it would solve probably about 95% of the issues people have with this.
Commander, Sabers, or Nettles now. Shiba Warrior Taro also if you're really cooking, but that is an unfortunate change that didn't need to happen. The second is that Raikou is too strong now. Raikou used to be extremely balanced. It was
Raikou was pretty strong before, be real.
generic removal accessible for every deck, but it was slow, which means that it interacted poorly with removal such as Monarchs and was dangerous behind tempo. And it also couldn't kill boss monsters such as Stardust or Titanial. Being a targeting effect just meant that you could bait it with chainable back row. Now it just clean out anything except for Monarchs, and it goes plus on flip unless only one card is committed. That is definitely way too strong because it means you can't really beat set monsters anymore without committing a Monarch or playing Nobleman, which has a ton of its own problems. Gear Town, of course, is very unfortunate for the Gear Town.
Oh, I'm going to miss Gear Town. I liked Gear Town a lot. I thought it was so cool. All the Gear Town decks.
I don't think anyone thought the Ancient Gear decks were too oppressive, so this is definitely collateral damage as well.
I mean, I didn't think the Ancient Gear decks were too oppressive. I thought they were cool. The, like, Kurez strats.
Necro Valley is another terrible change because buffing floodgates in general is usually not liked by people, especially a buff to Gravekeepers because of Royal Tribute. However, the weakness of Gravekeepers don't change, so I'm hesitant to say that Gravekeepers are just a tier 1 deck now with a better Necro Valley.
Okay, so everyone is talking about the new format like it's going to be run by Gravekeepers. I want to be clear. I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think the Necro Valley errata is that big of a deal.
If it were, it wouldn't even necessarily be because of Necro Valley. It would be the decline of Frog and also the rise of Blackwing. So these 4 changes were the ones I thought were truly very bad for the format. The next couple I don't think are good, but ultimately aren't a big deal. First is Aaron. When I returned to Edison, I thought Aaron worked the way it does now, and that would make Aaron way too broken. It basically just means that Aaron invalidates flip decks, which are already not strong. But now that Raikou is buffed to such a degree, I think it might be a good thing that Aaron is buffed as well, because a lot of the Raikou counterplay was lost. Now when people set a Raikou, they're more incentivized to set a battle trap behind the Raikou, which plays poorly into their own set monster, because that forces the Raikou on the set monster to protect the back row. But then you can get your own Raikou baited by setting a value monster such as Vayu or Dandelion. So the existence of Aaron, even if not every deck plays it, changes the risk-reward of turn 1 flips in such a way that I think it could still be healthy in this alternative meta. So Bryanak is the next one, and losing priority and only being once per turn are 2 massive nerfs. But in a way, I also think this is good. A lot of the time when you summon Bryanak, if you pitched multiple, the result would be the same. It's just that no one did that because you got more information by discarding one by one. The one deck I would say is severely affected by this are zombies because they lose the ability to pitch their subsequent goblin searches. That is extremely detrimental to their OTK setups, but is ultimately a trade-off that again makes Edison slower, which I think is overall a net benefit. Sengen mostly matters for synchroing in zombies and quick draw and then trying to activate the quick draw on the same turn.
Big day for zombies.
These decks are hugely unpopular, but this is a niche situation change that I do think is bad. Sengen can also search hand traps such as Crow, which could be dodged by using grave card effects in mid phase 2, and if you synchro with Sengen before, you could search the Snatch Steal monsters, but you can't use them after searching them now. It's not like anyone seriously cited those in the last years, but that is another option that I think is lost and not good. Finally is Rivalry and Gozen. A lot of people are saying that Rivalry and Gozen are going to ruin Edison, but this was how Rivalry and Gozen were back in 2021, and people weren't playing these cards back then. I thought these cards were good inside of them. Keegan and James thought they were good, but the majority of players didn't think they were good. Some of the people saying Gozen and Rivalry ruined Edison are the same players who told me it was bad back then.
Okay, see, that's not fair, right? You're like, but people weren't playing it back then. I mean, I was playing it because I was good and I knew that it was good. But other people said it was bad. So what were you wrong when you thought it was good then, or are you wrong now when you're saying it's not good? Right? If you thought that it was really good in the past, you can stand on business. These cards might be good. I think probably Sunny would say, even if they're not good, they produce game states that are really irritating.
I know opinions can change, but all of the backlash combined is just weird to me because I feel like a lot of the reasons people are giving for why this change is bad do not reflect history. I think these two are overrated personally. Floodgates and Edison are already weak. They have never been weaker in any format than Edison format, and they're weak for reasons that Gozen and Rivalry don't change. How many trap floodgates are played? It's just Royal Oppression, Decree, and Master Restrict. Occasionally Skill Drain and Nightmare are also played, but those are rarely played now because Lightsworns have fallen off, and also Skill Drain is just not supported by most decks in the format. So Edison is so wide, but people don't play Floods, even though there are a lot of Floods that cover a lot of matchups. Why is that? It's because Edison has too much removal. Edison has more spot removal than any format in history. For a floodgate to be strong, it has to floodgate the floodgate outs. That's why these are the only floodgates that are played. All of these flood the outs except Oppression, which is just the best floodgate in the format. Rivalry and Gozen don't do that. Rivalry and Gozen are good. They're uniquely powerful because they're the only floodgates aside from Oppression that generate advantage on activation. I'm not trying to undersell these cards, but they have not fixed the fundamental problems with Edison floodgates. The situation these two...
If you conceptualize these as just torrential tribute that requires your opponent to dedicate a removal spell to it, that's still probably good enough, right?
Cards have errata that are distinct from the current Edison ruling is tributing Raikou and Treeborn for Caius. I think the Raikou situation is very overrated. Committing multiple cards in the Raikou is the most ideal situation for Raikou. If they actually had Raikou Caius, they would be killing the back row first and then Caiusing the monster. That's always how it's been. You have to win a 50-50 on the back row, then flip it afterward for this to ever be a play, and then they can still set their other flip monsters. It will occasionally matter for Hamster, but then you gave the Raikou a guaranteed plus when that gets flipped. So Treeborn is a major concern. How many decks does this affect? It's my deck. It's Frogs. This is primarily a Frog hit more than anything else. Yes, I understand they're going to be played more, so you have them for more situations that they're already good in for the current format, but even looking at meta decks, all decks have built-in removal in their engine. Even a deck affected by Rivalry, such as Lightsworn, have multiple ways to kill it. Diva Hero so kills it the same way with Prodigy and Caius. Frogs can float into Unifrog. GBs are another deck. They're out with Bestiari, and luckily Equest and Bestiari have the same type and attribute.
That's funny. But you know, you flip it when they don't have those.
Overall, I do a lot of replay analysis. The majority of lost games in Edison are due to misplays, but almost every single one that isn't are due to bombs such as Dark Arms or Brain Control. Removing power from these cards has been a request made by the players for years. If you look for videos on how to fix Edison format on YouTube, you'll find players asking for these changes, but now that they're actually being implemented, it's being negatively received. I think giving power to the defensive cards will bring back and forth trading. These cards such as Book of Moon, Compulse, and Discard Traps are already flawed in that they're -1 value, and thus must occupy very little deck space, which means you have an extra add layer to gameplay where people have to consider holding their -1 defense for power plays.
I mean, so this is... We just disagree on a very fundamental level, right? Is like, I have no problem with games being determined by bombs. I think bombs are a necessary part of Yu-Gi-Oh! I think they're like super cool, like big flashy monsters and shit. But if you don't think that, this is internally consistent.
So there's a trade-off because we're losing the technical advantages that we get from taking advantage of knowledge checks with priority. For example, if you normal summon Sirocco and then declare the effect with no black.
Again, I don't really want to get into the priority discussion because like... priority knowledge checks does feel like a shitty way to win a game. They're like not real.
Things on field and then chain torrential or deck dev to make cards miss timing such as Frog. But when I win just from knowledge checking my opponent, I personally don't feel very good. This is just a me thing, but when I play, I'd rather my opponent make the best decision they can, assuming they know the rulings. A lot of people who play in real life just do not know all the rulings. They might be returning players or don't play a lot online. When you go to larger events, you do meet a lot of these players, and that's why I feel like skill expression may be increasing because we may have lost the skill expression surrounding priority tricks, but we've placed a greater emphasis on trading in longer games. In terms of the meta, not the cards, everyone is dooming about Blackwings. Some people are saying Blackwings will be tier 0.
I'm gonna be clear, I am also dooming about Blackwings.
I can guarantee with 100% certainty that cannot happen. Every deck is nerfed. People like to say that, but Blackwings get Gozen in Rivalry, so players think it must be the best. I'm not convinced Blackwing is guaranteed to be better. I think this is a very simplistic view of the format. If you think about this change as the ban list, the decks that are the least hit on the ban list are not necessarily the ones that will be the best deck of any given format. Earlier, I talked about why Gozen in Rivalry matter less than most people think, in my opinion. But the thing about Blackwing is that the meta had shifted in a way that became less hostile for it over time. People will make fun of me for this, but Blackwing's highest placement at SJC Edison was top 16. It did very bad for a deck of its quality. It was a low sample size considering that's one tournament, but if we look at the meta, it's not hard to see why it didn't perform. The deck basically looks identical to how it is today. Blackwing is a deck that probably changed the least historically. People were on infinite flip monsters and spot removal at the time. Blackwing doesn't trade well into 1-for-1 spot removal, and cards such as Gravekeeper Spy are hamsters. The meta back in the day was genuinely a lot scarier to play for Blackwings, and this was also true during Edison's revival. Blackwing was popular and almost always top 2 representation at every tournament, but it wasn't top 8 in most tournaments. I feel like people forget that. It didn't even make top 8 until 7th place at RBET 2 during the first RBET season. Honestly, a lot of it is Frog's fault. Frog just demands way too much side deck space from every deck, and it also just kills all the slower rogue decks because it naturally outgrinds them. We've established that defense such as Book of Moon and Trap Hole are going to be better in this format, and that Frog gets worse. All of these are bad signs for Blackwing if the defense shifts back to being better against Blackwing. It could be the best deck, or better. I'm not saying that's impossible. I'm confident it will be among the best decks. But to say the format just blatantly buffed Blackwing and hit every other deck, I don't think is accurate. I feel like that's very disrespectful to Edison's demonstrated resiliency over the years. Of course, not all effects of this change are good. It was very bad that they announced this change after people were already planning to go to Nationals.
Jeez, I honestly, like, the timing could not have been worse.
With flights and hotels already booked, that's very unfortunate for everyone who was registered. The timing of the announcement was definitely too late from Konami. Second, it also divides the community. That's also horrible. If it were
huge problem. Like, Edison is already a sliver of a sliver in terms of representation.
Me, I would have banned Trap Dustry and Brain Control for my ideal Edison format, and most people hate these cards. But the reason we never did that, even though a lot of people hate those cards, is because it would be terrible to divide the format. It's definitely bad if we can't come to a consensus because then we have a split community. In my opinion, one of the biggest reasons Tengu never grew big, and also why Toss isn't currently big, is because of this exact reason. It's awkward when you can't decide if you're going to play Toronto Tengu or Columbus Tengu, and
okay, I'm gonna be honest. I as someone who spent a fair amount of time in like the Tengu community, was this a real discussion people were having?
when some people only play one, your community can never be as big as it should be. It also definitely has negative spillover effects for other formats. I haven't done a deep analysis of other formats such as GOAT to give an opinion, but I'm sure even though I believe the Edison changes are good, that does not mean all other format changes are the same.
Right.
I do think concerns that this is a slippery slope or arbitrary are unfounded. The rules are pretty clear. We play with current card text and no priority. There is almost no chance that we are randomly banning cards in the future because Konami doesn't really do erratas anymore. I know this isn't what a lot of people want to hear, and please believe me when I say I don't want people to think I have some nefarious goal or anything. If you think about it from my perspective,
Sunny has a nefarious goal.
have spent more hours on the current version of Edison compared to almost every single person in the world, and my favorite deck is one of the decks getting hit the hardest by erratas. If anyone should hate these changes, it should be me. But ultimately, when I think about it, I can't objectively say this is a horrible decision in good faith. I maybe don't make as many videos about Edison anymore, but my one true love is and will always be retro formats. Everything I've done in Edison has been to grow Edison, starting this channel, making all my deck lists public, answering everyone's questions in Discord, replay analysis, publicizing my side deck sheets. It's why the first thing you see when you click on my channel is the promotion of Edison YouTubers. My ultimate goal has always been to share my love for Edison with as many people as possible, and in order to grow Edison, the hardcore Edison players like me aren't the most important. It's the newer and returning players. I will outlast everyone in the world for Edison format. I can guarantee it. In 2091, when I'm 90 years old, completely geriatric, immobile, I'm still going to be normal summoning Stratos. My two greatest
Hopefully they won't errata it by then.
priorities for a competitive activity are high skill ceiling, because otherwise I wouldn't play it, but even more important is a low skill floor, or else we cannot gain the people necessary for a community to flourish. And I think this is a change that could push both ends of that spectrum. I think this is a change that could be better for both newer and returning players, as well as us, the existing players, as long as we keep an open mind, because we need to be honest. No one is publicly saying this because it will be bad for community health, but at this point we need an intervention, so I'll be the one to say it. Edison will eventually decline, just as any community does, and there are people in the community that already think this is happening. They won't say it outside of private discords, but you can see the effects. How many established players have you seen in the past year offload their Edison collection? And when
I mean, be real. This is a Yu-Gi-Oh problem in general, right?
asked if they're quitting, they just reply, haha, I'm just letting other players get the good stuff. Are you actually believing that? Like, people's actions will reflect their beliefs. Edison is not dead, not even close, but its growth has definitely slowed down. Notice how all the Edison content creators, except for Keegan, Echo, and Fraser, can't break the 4,000 sub barrier.
That's been true forever, right?
Notice how there's not even half as many online tournaments as there were in the last 3 years. If you go to the edisonformat.net page, my own tournament win happened in November, and that's still one of the earliest posts on the page. I'm sure Edison is fine on a local level with multiple thriving
Okay, your argument for Edison declining can't be that the people at edisonformat.com don't fucking update their website. That's always been the case.
scenes. But how can we actively gain players? People say GOAT has died, but the reason for that is that the player base is getting older and they can't get new players. There are only so many retired Edison players who are interested in coming back and haven't already given Edison a try. We have somehow lost the original message. So many comments now are talking about the players that exist already. The people who don't play Edison now don't matter according to many comments. When did the purpose change? Edison started as a grassroots community with the primary goal of gathering new players. They should be some of the most important people as the future of our community. Some people are saying they don't exist, but that's just not true. You can see people commenting, I'm a current player, but I think it's hard to get into Edison with all the different card decks and rules. It's not that they don't exist, it's that people don't care about these players' experiences because the ones that do speak out are met with gatekeeping and elitism.
All right, I will gatekeep them. No, this is something that Josh said too, and it's very strange to me. I think that Josh and Sunny and Konami just don't understand the purpose of these events, I guess I would say. So I think all of them have in their mind the example of a prototypical Yu-Gi-Oh player who wants to play Edison, right? And they envision it as an individual who is already totally bought in and enamored with advanced format Yu-Gi-Oh, but would like to try out another format just to do so. They check out Edison format, read about ignition effect priority, and go, oh my god, I can't believe it, I'm out. Okay? I don't doubt that these people exist, and Sunny, has spoken to some, so, apparently they are around. But it boggles my mind to think, firstly, that anyone would get through the weirdness that is advanced rulings and then be like, but there's an ignition effect? You're telling me that there's an effect priority completely analogous to quick effect priority that I also have to understand? Like, I get that. I don't really think that that's too big a bridge for them to jump. But I guess I would just say I don't think these people are the target demo for Edison. Right? I don't think the person that Konami is chasing is an individual that purchases modern cards, plays advanced format at events, and wants to play a second format. Right? I think that those people are already Yu-Gi-Oh players. They're already buying Yu-Gi-Oh product. They are not the reason that these changes are being made. I think the purpose of sanctioning Time Wizard is that Konami is trying to wrench back an entire class of players that have lapsed in their commitment to Yu-Gi-Oh! That the number one thing Konami's trying to do by sanctioning retro play isn't give advanced format players something to do in between formats that are ass, but instead is to incentivize play from people who remember playing in high school or on the playground or want to try out Stardust Dragon, right? And I think we may be looking at this backwards. That the change isn't being done to ease the transition to Edison for modern players. Those people are already in. They don't have to get them. It's instead made to ease the transition from Edison by individuals who uniquely play Edison to advanced. I don't think this is too far-fetched. A significant amount of Konami's recent product lines seem designed to give retro format players something to buy. I think this is meant to remove the barrier in the mind of Edison players between Edison and Modern and make them think, well, I should pick up those Ryziel cards as well. There's certainly some number of people who play Modern, want a different experience, and find Edison frustrating because of rules wackiness. I understand that. My experience has been every single Time Wizard event I've ever played, at the local level, at the YCS level, Ultimate Time Wizard, is that dozens of people will come up to me. I ask almost everyone about why they're playing, what they're playing. Will come up to me and say, well, I remember playing when I was a kid and really liking Lightsworn. I heard there was a tournament where I could play it, so I showed up. At Vegas, there were like 100,000 people who were just like, oh, yeah, I mean, back in the day, I played Machina, and I heard it was okay in Edison, so I started playing on Dueling Book, and now I'm here. I just think there's so many more people like that, these lapsed Yugists, than there are converts from Modern. And I mean converts from Modern that also are put off by the rules. And I think that this change is not being made, again, to ease the transition backwards for advanced players, but to ease the transition forwards for Edison-only players to make them more effective consumers for new product. Because right now, maybe they're buying Retro Pack. You know, maybe they're participating at OTSs and paying entry to brick and mortar stores, but they could be buying every new set as it's released.
It just feels like we have a little bit of herd mentality right now, because even the tamest opinions from well-known community members such as James Requari or anyone who says anything positive about this change is just being smited. And this is often the real downfall of multiple competitive communities, an inability to adapt in the face of changing trends. I know that a lot of people who are
changing trends, like it's a bunch of people who are excited to play this and not a directive from God
about this, are people who built the community. That's true. But a lot of the people who like this change are also people who are right there from the beginning building the community, and we are just attacking them for what I consider to be pretty tame and reasonable responses. Again, I just want to end off by reiterating, if you're upset about the announcement, you're completely valid. I'm not saying you're wrong for feeling the way you do, but I also think this is a change that has many benefits that are not being discussed, and if we just keep an open mind, we can actually grow Edison to be bigger than it has ever been before.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is, I think that Sunny raises some good points. I think that there are upsides to this change. I think they are massively outweighed by the downsides. And I struggle to think that there are more individuals put off by the concept of having to remember that Goyo Guardian doesn't need an Earth Tuner than there are individuals excited to play with the cards they had as a child and the decks they remember enjoying in their teens. I mean, it has just been my experience that there's more of the latter than the former. Having spoken with a lot of people about these. I do think that, like, historical accuracy as a barometer, I skipped completely over it because I totally agree that that's a total nothing argument. Like, who gives a fuck how historically accurate it is? The only thing I really care about is if the format is good and fun and diverse, interesting, and has the capacity to change. That's one of the things that's frustrated me about Tengu format, is that there aren't huge metagame shifts. Like, after 5 years of scrutiny, you know, Tengu Plant has gone from being the literal best deck to the literal best deck. You know, Agents has gone from being the second best deck to the second best deck. You know, Frazier figured out Gravekeeper. That's the big iteration on the format. And I think the downside that it may split the community should be viewed, you know, as a deal breaker. You know, even if Sunny's completely right and a significant amount of these format changes are good, you know, it's nice that you can do the funny little trick where you DD Crow something that's being discarded for cost. Even if all of those work as intended, splitting the community into people who do and do not want to operate with these new changes risks the format, regardless of how good it is. There's also a bunch of weird stuff where, like, hasn't it come out that they're not changing everything? There's no EMZ, there's still first turn draw. So someone who's moving from Modern backwards has to consider, like, ignition effect priority a sufficient filter by which they will not engage with the format, but other old rules, first turn draw, and no EMZ, those are okay. You know, it's just this like weird nebulous fuzzy. We're enforcing some old directives, but not others. I mean, I think there is this discussion can only be understood through one lens, and that is they are making the decision to do this not because of anything relative to IRL play. They're making this decision because that is what mechanically they can do in Master Duel. Right? Has anyone else noticed that the changes that are being implemented are exactly the things that work in Master Duel? Like, they're able to prevent the EMZ and do the first turn draw because they coded that in already. The reason they can't do ignition effect priority, erratas, or field spell changes because that's what's in Master Duel. Like, that's the whole reason. Legacy format ladder soon. That's the thing, is like, I think legacy format ladder is a really cool idea. I hope it gets into the client, but I don't know why it has to be a 1-to-1 with paper play. Like, why on earth can't we just play no prio errata cards Edison in client on Master Duel while prio erratas Edison exists in paper? There's already a degree of separation between what's played on Master Duel and what's in advanced format in both the TCG and the OCG. It's not an analogous format to either of those. Why does it have to be picture perfect for Edison or for GOAT? Especially because it's dealing with like OCG release dates, so GOAT and Edison look completely different anyway. It's just really odd. I'm sorry, but this has the same vibe as Chuck Schumer's Long Island centrist Tulpa, but for hypothetical Edison players. My Tulpa is Edison or advanced player filtered by ignition effect priority. Advanced player who wants so badly to play Edison format, but ooh, the priority. Ooh, I can't get over the priority. Advanced format player who is so fucking annoyed about the skill checks that exist in Edison. But, you know, if you just declare Fateful Adventure, you really don't have to tell them which effect you're using. I think this is more because they can't train judges to judge Time Wizard events. Again, I think that is a good argument beaten by the reality of the situation, which is that every Time Wizard event at every YCS is almost wholly Edison. We're talking about it like they have to be responsible for rulings knowledge for all of Edison, for all of GOAT, for all of Meadowlands, for all of Tengu, for all of 2018 Firewall format, and for everything in between. But realistically, a page primer on how we are going to rule Ryko at this event would just solve this problem, handed to only the judges who are doing the Edison event. You know, it's much less work than fucking dealing with Rivalry of Warlords. Wouldn't it be nice if other formats had events, though? Yeah, well, if they kill Edison, then the other formats will have events. Should we watch Josh's?
And the first thing we're going to talk about is, of course, the Edison drama, I suppose.
I love Josh. When Josh has a beard, he goes up like 3 points. Am I the only one who thinks this? I don't even like facial hair, but on Josh,
I don't use the word drama very often, but I feel like this time around it kind of felt like a drama over the course of the weekend when I was logging into Twitter or YouTube. My timeline was full with people complaining about it. So let's talk about it just for context, so we're all on the.
Can you even grow any? Me? Yeah, but you don't want to see it. It looks like shit, dog.
Same page. What has happened? Let me move over here so we can read it together. They have announced some rule changes for not just Edison format, but also Time Wizard in general. But of course, it does mostly affect Edison format because that is currently the biggest Time Wizard format, but it also affects GOAT and some other Time Wizard formats as well that are more or less popular. But cards have gotten errata over the time. So we can talk about some examples of this that are specifically relevant for Edison. Like things that come to mind immediately are like Brain Control, Go-Yo Guardian, Future Fusion, and there's a bunch more. Sinister Serpent for Gold event, and I don't usually have that much time to participate in Time Wizard like official tournaments. The majority of the time when I play Time Wizard, it's with friends, right, at home, or even at like tournaments. I can sit down with friends and play some Time Wizard. That is most of the time how I do it, and in those cases, this will not affect the way I play Time Wizard with my friends. Like if I want to play Time Wizard with the old rules with my friends, I can still do that.
I do want to be completely honest. It will. I know you're saying it won't, but it will. Everyone always does this. They're like, if you want to play by the old rules, you still can. Just play them with your friends. No, man. Your friends are going to start carrying Konami legal Edison decks with them. When they whip them out to play casually, you're not going to be like having this conversation. They're going to be like, we're going to play with what we have. What we have is decks built for Konami events. It's the same with people being like, well, you know, if a card's banned, you can still play with the old one. Yeah, and you won't.
For official tournaments, of course, this is something that is going to impact it a decent amount. The only comparison I personally have to this is that this is basically how the Time Wizard duel trials have worked in Master Duel, right? In Master Duel, they had those sort of like 2005 GOAT format or 2000.
This is true, but of course, remember that neither of those events were GOAT or Edison. They were the OCG's variant, which were fundamentally different.
10 Edison format, they had those duel trials with those older ban lists and older card pool and stuff like that. In those settings, you still had to play with the new card text, for example, right? Like in those events, you still played with errata, Brain Control, errata, Future Fusion, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to be honest with you, even though that was one of my critique points of those events, I still had a great time when they happened.
And to be clear, if they were to bring this back as like a retro format ladder, I think they should. And I would have a great time playing all errata, no prio Edison with the 2010 OCG card pool. I will play the fuck out of it because I like the gameplay. That said, there's no reason why that should be a one-to-one analog for IRL play. No other Master Duel feature is a one-to-one analog for IRL paper play.
And I think that, I guess, is something that is to take away from this entire thing is like, you can still have fun with those kind of rule sets. It's a change to Edison format. It is. You're not playing Edison format the same way that you did back in the day. But it's still, a lot of it is still going to be the same. Like, it's like...
And I want to be clear, the reason that people have fun with Edison isn't because it's Edison. You know, the reason that people have fun with Edison is because it's a balanced, well-rounded format. And this change risks that. Like, that's what they're upset about.
90% the same. Even though some very important cards work differently, it's still...
90% the same would be like, well, if you like Agov, you can still play Agov. We've just made the decision that Maxi is legal. 90% of the time, you're going to be playing the same cards.
Doesn't mean the format is terrible. I know people are not very happy with change in general when they've just been going to Time Wizard events over the last couple of years.
I mean, especially with this, whose stated outcome is that it won't change.
I do think there's a realistic chance that if this is something that that people don't like, that are traveling to major events to play in the Ultimate Time Wizard tournaments, people might stop doing that, and then there's a world where, you know, that is the feedback that they receive, basically, like, these events are now less popular than before, so we're going to revert this or something. I
mean, be honest, they will cancel Time Wizard. That's what they'll do. That's the outcome here.
For the most part, I don't think this is a positive change, even though I do see some of the reasoning for it, which I don't know. Let's think about the reasoning for a second at least. What could they be? Because I've been wondering about this in general. Like, why did they change this to begin with? And I feel like just trying to think about it, like, this does make it so the rules of Time Wizard formats are more in line with the rules of modern Yu-Gi-Oh, of course. And I feel like you have to think about it from a perspective of why are they offering Time Wizard events to begin with, right? Time Wizard events, probably are not. They're not being offered to sell Yu-Gi-Oh cards. I feel like, because the majority of Edison players have their cards, and they don't really need to buy new product to get their cards. I mean, there's been retro cards in the rarity.
That's why they're trying to get Edison players to buy new product by teaching them modern rulings. They want them to make the jump.
Collections, but for the most part, you know, they're not making a ton of money off of people playing Time Wizard because they usually use old cards. They are not interested in the new stuff. So what's the reason for offering Time Wizard events, right? Because, I mean, they're not making a lot of money off of it. I feel like they are offering these tournaments as a way for people to get back into the game. Like, people that played back in the day can kind of like return to Yu-Gi-Oh in an easier way than just like playing modern right off the bat.
But to be clear, the best way to do that is to enable them to play with the cards, erratas, and rulings that they remember.
And I feel like maybe what they thought was it's an easier way for people to get into Yu-Gi-Oh if the rules are the same. Like, I mean, someone like, and I do think this is a valid point, by the way. At least from my experience, there's definitely people that, like, when they get back into Yu-Gi-Oh, the first thing they are recommended is like, play some Time Wizard to get used to the game before you play Modern or whatever. Like that is something that does happen.
But the fact that that can still happen with the old rulings makes me wonder why we changed them.
And then I feel like maybe it's weird for those people when they play Time Wizard with completely different rule sets. Like they're so used to priority and maybe other rulings that are different and so on and so forth. And I think that is maybe easier to get into modern Yu-Gi-Oh! If you are used to the exact same rules. Because I mean, it's not the exact same because like Pendulum Zone and Extra Monster Zone is like different, but like the rest is going to be the same. It also makes it a lot easier for judges at events to judge Time Wizard because I basically, and I can tell you this from my perspective, even as someone who's played in 2010, even as someone who's played in 2010, you forget about these rulings. Like you don't remember. I don't remember all the things how they were in 2010. And when I play Edison, I always have to remind myself like how did this work again? Like did Raiko target? Did this card like how did this card interact? How did this ruling work? And a lot of judges, they judge like basically you'd have to if you want to do it properly, you'd have to basically have judges specifically learning Time Wizard stuff and just to host Time Wizard events in the exact same form as they were back in the day, which ultimately maybe they reached a conclusion it wasn't worth it, right? Like maybe it's not worth it. And then the thing is like,
I mean, the easy way to do that is just to disseminate a page worth of information to everyone who's staffed on the Time Wizard like table, right? If you don't want them to have to be responsible for every single format, you announce beforehand, we are doing 2010 here. You can run 2010.
Yes, this changes Edison, but in some ways it also like changes Edison, not even for the worst. Like I would argue, I'll go out on a limb here, and Dragon players are going to hate me for this, but Future Fusion was a card that should have never been printed the way it was printed. So maybe if we're removing
Future Fusion haters, you hate to see it, honestly.
Future Fusion from Edison format.
But again, now the argument has become, okay, maybe this is a bad thing, but there are some quality gameplay implications, which is like, fine, if you want to play a format in which Future Fusion works differently or is not legal, skip ahead in time 6 months, right?
Maybe there's a world where it becomes a better format. I know you're going to hate me for saying this.
Again, we have other formats where Future Fusion is illegal that have not caught on. Like, there's a reason why this one has. I don't want to risk that by removing load-bearing pieces of the equation.
But Edison format, like, there's a couple of cards. There is a couple of cards that are not healthy. And I'm not talking about my boy Goyo Guardian. They did my boy Goyo Guardian dirty, okay? But
Goyo Guardian is just the poster child for this. Like, he's so integral to the format. So relevant to the Edison experience, so necessary from a balance perspective, and now is just totally unplayable.
Future Fusion as one of the examples that has received
not even like Bryo, where
errata.
like you still can do it like 70% of the time.
And then Priority as well. Priority is a ruling that they removed because it didn't make sense. Ultimately, no one is asking these days to
I don't think that's true. I don't think they removed it because it didn't make sense.
Bring Priority back. So yes, it changes Edison format, but it still remains a good format. So ultimately, I personally
like
can still see myself.
A huge assumption, though. Yes, they're changing Edison format, but it still remains a good format. It very easily could not. I hope that it remains a good format. If it remains a good format, that'll be good. But it's also very possible that these changes make it much worse.
Of entering a Time Wizard events with those slightly adjusted rules,
That's the thing I care about the most. I want to be clear. Not about historical accuracy, not about any of that shit. I care about, is the format better or worse than it was before the changes? And if it's worse, that sucks.
And I think it's 100% like valid if people hate these changes and they want to play Edison exactly the way it was back in the day. I think that's valid. For me personally, this is not as big of a deal as people are making it, because I can still see myself entering these tournaments, and I can still see myself having fun in these. And I do see some of the reasonings behind it. So I don't know how to...
Does Josh play Time Wizard at YCS's? It's like, I can see myself entering these tournaments. Does he? He's in too long. He's too good at advanced to ever have to play side events.
Feel about this exactly. I think if you want to have fun at an Edison public event, like at a major event, I think that is still possible, even when you can't play Goyo Guardian, or even when like Red Eye Darkness Metal Dragon has a text changer.
Dude, and you can have fun playing Teledad format, but you don't, because the format is not fun and bad. Like, this all rests on the assumption that Edison will be fine, that it will still be good after all these hits, despite the fact that it is the only format outside of GOAT with any sort of lasting power. You got to understand, these are fragile-ass formats.
Or whatever. So I don't think this is as massive of a deal. Bryonac, Rank Control, Red MD, Raiko, Absolute Zero. Yeah, there's changes. I'm not saying it changes nothing. I'm just saying that what's left after all these changes might still be a good format.
It might. But people already have a good format that is being taken from them. Like, if your best argument for these changes is, it might still be good, well, it's good now.
and it's still going to be fun, I think, and it's still going to be reminiscent of old Yu-Gi-Oh in a lot of ways still. Like it's
And he's
just
saying it's
basically
based
in
off
some ways it
nothing,
brings some
based
fresh
off
air into
vibes.
Edison format, you know, which is not the worst thing ever. It's not about whether it's enjoyable. This change kills Edison's identity. Brio errata plus no Prio is basically demolishing the iconic play that Prio is. At these public events, yes. But you can still play Edison. Like, where did Edison come from?
I do like, as soon as someone tells him something that like defeats the argument, he's like, yeah, but you can still ignore it if you're with your friends.
Edison came from a place where people just played it with their friends. It became popular because people played it so much. It didn't get popularized by Konami or by public events at YCSs. That's not where Edison is coming from. You can still play Edison. These retro formats will still exist as long as people like them. So I don't agree with the...
Yeah, but you can't play them at your locals, right? You can't play them. There's no... You can play them at RBETs and in your houses. You can't play them at locals. Like, that's the biggest one for me. A ton of locals around me have crawled back from stopping Yu-Gi-Oh! At their store because a burgeoning Edison community bailed them out. And this is like, sorry guys, we can't sanction what you're doing anymore.
With people that are saying it's as crazy.
Well, they could. Okay, the realistic scenario is that a bunch of locals are going to, like, do this when you summon Goyo Guardian. But, you know, no local is going to cop to flagrantly violating Konami policy.
Yes, and now you can never play it at an official event again. You can only never play it at an official event again if you are not willing to even try the new format. Because I see you guys say...
Wait, what is this? They're saying you can't play old Edison ever again in an official capacity. He's like, well, only if you're not trying the new one. Who knows? The new one might be good. New Coke might taste just as good.
Like, oh, Josh, Konami influencer and stuff like that, which, by the way, shut up. I can have opinions that are not negative about the game. I know you are used to content creators always just having negative opinions about everything.
Dude, this is one of the very few positive opinions that content creators profess, is that Edison is good.
And I'm not saying it's a positive change. I'm giving you a perspective of what to make out of it. I am saying that your criticism is 100% valid if you listened to what I was saying. And I do think that this changes Edison, and I do think it's valid to not like it, but I also think it is valid to maybe think about whether it is still playable with that. And I do think it is. And I can say this from my experience. I've played this format in Master Duel. This exact format, basically. I've played it in Master Duel.
Totally different card pool. Uses OCG cards from 2010. And that format is fine. They should put it in Master Duel. But they should also not fuck with Paper Edison.
And it was still fun. I had a great time in the Goat Duel trial.
Although I will be completely honest, it also was dominated by fucking terrible ass combo decks, remember?
I had a great time in the Edison Duel trial. They were all fun. They all still felt like, to me, as someone who's played back in the day, they still felt nostalgic, and they are fine. And I see the reasons why they're doing this to make it easier for judges, to make it easier for people to switch over from Time Wizard to Modern.
From Edison
there
to
are
Modern.
For this.
Remember, this is a decision that is being made not for the health of Edison, for the continued existence of Modern at the expense of Edison. Even in a best-case scenario, the intended goal of this policy is to siphon players from Edison to the format where they will buy more cards. You all understand that, right? Everyone's on the same page as me? Even in a world where post-advanced Edison is good, the goal of aligning the rule set and erratas with Modern is to ease a transition out of Edison and into Modern, where they can purchase cards on a cycle.
And priority was a stupid ruling anyways. Some Yu-Gi-Oh cards deserve to get
You
changed.
can't
except for my
hear
boy
that and
Goyo
say
Guardian.
it is healthy
and
for Edison.
I think ultimately it's just fine. That is genuinely my opinion on this. I am paid for Challenger Cups. I am paid for other things. I am not paid for my opinion on the Time Wizard change. And I tell you, like, twice a stream how much I hate Snake Eyes and how much I hate Tenpai. So I'm allowed to have negative opinions, and I voice my negative opinions, but this one is just genuinely something that I, as a big fan of Time Wizard formats, still don't feel that negatively about.
I'm sorry. How could you possibly be a big fan of Time Wizard formats and want one of them to no longer be playable? Even if you consider yourself, like, just in the interest of having Time Wizard play being available. I don't know.
Do you think they might revert some erratas that don't make sense, like Goyo and Brain Control? That is a different topic. That is something...
If they revert Goyo, then I will eat my words. If they print Goyo fixed, a significant amount of this goes away for me.
I would like to see in general. If we are changing cards that are too powerful, I feel like you should be able to revert them back at some point. Like, I think that is a legit criticism of erratas. Like, I don't like it that, like, Goyo Guardian in its modern state, even though it would be no problem at all, has not gone back to its old print. I know it's like erratas in general are like a logistical nightmare, but I would like to see them go back on some of these. But yeah, they could just go like, okay, this change we've made 10 years ago or whatever.
How is this fundamentally different than a Konami announced Edison ban list, which I think would universally be rejected? That's a good way of thinking about it, CJLX. Why is that type of meddling beyond the pale? But a change that has fundamentally the same impact by banning Goyo Guardian totally acceptable to people. If you want a format with different bans than Edison has, you can play the literal next format.
Whatever, or 12 years ago, does not seem to be appropriate anymore. We're going to change it back. I think that'd be a cool thing to do. But yeah, that's a different discussion. In general, I'm not a fan of erratas, but that's a different topic, right? Like, I'm not a fan of changing a card. I think if a card is too powerful, I'd rather...
I think it's also important to point out this is totally not future-proofed. Gage, thanks for the raid. I appreciate it. If you're in a position where you decide that the way you're going to engage with Yu-Gi-Oh! Is to play GOAT forever. Let's say that you have decided to one-trick GOAT control until you're 90. To invest in the format, you've purchased Champion Pack Metamorphosis. And let's just go to TCG Player right now and check what that looks like. A Champion Pack Metamorphosis will run you somewhere in the realm of... $250 for foreign copies and about, oh God, about $500 for an English copy. 2 years into your tenure as a GOAT format player, Konami decides that Metamorphosis is an iconic enough Yu-Gi-Oh card that they are going to errata it. They change some of the wording, they give it a hard once per turn, and they release it back into the TCG. Your eternal format does not function the same anymore. That's something they can do at any point to any card they consider iconic enough to warrant an errata, and you are electing to play a format full of iconic cards. What if Dust Shoot comes back with very specific stipulations about when it can be used, you know? What if they decide to give it the, like, Crush Card Virus style murder treatment, where now Dust Shoot says you can only activate this on your 3rd or 4th turn or beyond? That card goes away forever, you know? I don't know. It's just insane.
See it just be banned and they print, like, a new version of it. Like, they've done a lot of retrains on classic cards, right? Like, I think, if they just printed a card with like a Sangan retrain, that would have been cooler than a Sangan errata, for example. And then just if you think Sangan's a problem, then just keep it banned. That would be my preferred way of handling it. But yeah, that's not the world we live in, unfortunately. Oh, yeah. Don't you think it enables a more floodgatey environment if the trade-off is getting cards like the new Necro Valley and the post-2011 rivalry goes and rulings? I don't think it's worth. See, I don't think they are thinking about it in that way. Like, you might be...
They should be, man. At the end of the day, the most important thing for the continued health of Edison is that the format is fun to play. And if a change is made that impacts a bunch of cards that are not fun to play by buffing them, even if those cards are still only okay, that sucks.
Right, but I think this is more like a decision out of principle, where they don't want...
Dude, I mean, that's it, right? Like, who gives a fuck about the principle of the thing? I care about the material reality.
They don't want the landscape of public events at official tournaments to be like essentially Time Wizard formats with different rule sets for every single one of them, which is like a nightmare to judge. And it is difficult for people to play. Like, it is.
To be clear, this is a really quality argument that is defeated by reality, by the fact that when you go to a YCS, the only ones that are firing are Edison and GOAT. Like, if it was true that judges needed to keep a compendium on every change that's been made from 2003 until now, yeah, this would suck. But as of yet, all it requires you to have is a page about if Raikou targets or not, and a page about how Metamorphosis works.
In some ways, it is a little gatekeepy.
Meadowlands Fires, I already mentioned to you, Caleb. Don't get greedy.
Because, like, yes, if you are super into Edison format and you know all these rules, you are going to have a massive advantage over someone who goes to a public event and maybe wants to try Edison format for the first time.
Same with Modern. If someone comes to the YCS for Ultimate Time Wizard, and then after scrubbing out decides they're going to pick up a deck and play Modern and get sauced by the stupid rulings interactions that exist in the base game, the same thing is going to happen.
But they're only playing Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, you play that, like, there's going to be so many instances where those people lose games because they are not familiar with the old rules. That does happen.
Oh, darn.
That does happen. Because they are super familiar with Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Rules, but they just want to play like a Time Wizard event just to see what it's like. And then...
See, that's it. This change is being made with the express benefit... like, he's like, the best case scenario is this helps Modern Rulings people who are only tangentially interested in playing Edison after they scrub out of main event. Like, that's who the change is for. But that helps nobody. That's not getting more people into the game. That's giving people who are already in the game one more avenue to experience it. The change is being made to siphon people who are in the game in a way that doesn't produce enough money to a version of the game that does.
They lose because they don't know the rules or whatever. That does happen. That's just for knowledge. I don't know if that's a good argument. I think the argument is not whether that's good or bad. The argument is that that is a barrier to entry for Time Wizard formats for someone who's never played them before. And I think that
it's a barrier to entry to Rivalry of Warlords players to not be familiar with Magistus cards.
that is something they're trying to remove. The first time I played Time Wizard, I was told I can't respond to a summon, and I thought they were cheating. What, like, they use priority? They like use priority before you change or something? Yeah. No, I mean, I honestly, I think this is kind of whatever.
This is totally Josh, like, taking the other side of an argument for a hypothetical and then convincing himself of it. I guarantee. As someone who does this all the time.
It's just something Konami shouldn't touch. See, on the one hand, everyone is asking for better support by Konami for these Time Wizard tournaments and acknowledge that people are playing them. But then when they host them themselves by their own rules, people are also upset. I don't know.
You gotta be kidding me, man. Come on. You can't say that shit about you don't want to say like, oh, Konami shill, etc., and then say something like that. Come on. When people say they want more Konami support for retro formats, what they mean is they want Konami to put together a compendium of rulings so that individuals can cross-reference them. They want tournament-level support for these events, like they have been giving at Ultimate Time Wizards. They want products specifically designed for retro players, which they have been doing with the Retro Pack. They're not saying we want you to totally change everything about this thing we already love. It's crazy to frame it this way. I'm sorry, Josh. I respect the guy a lot. This is totally disingenuous to be like, everyone says they want Konami to help retro, but when they do something with retro, here the thing, of course, is destroying it, then everyone gets mad. Yeah, because it's not a positive change. If Konami took a big shit over the Ultimate Time Wizard pairings and smeared it all over the page, they'd be impacting the format, but I don't think people would be excited about it.
Oh, because I don't understand. I feel like this is not a positive change, but I think people are just overreacting.
I do think that he read that in chat. I actually saw that line in chat and then he read it verbatim. I do think people are like more frustrated about this than reflects on the change, but I think they're frustrated because of what it represents, right? Like, it is very possible that Edison is still fine. I don't think it... I think that it will be markedly worse for these changes, but it is possible that it is fine. Even if it is, this is a situation where a community-oriented format, here Edison, brought up by a bunch of content creators and a bunch of individuals at their locals who wanted to relive a specific part of Yu-Gi-Oh!, was co-opted by Konami, changed in ways antithetical to the continued existence of the format, and a precedent was set that more changes could come down the line if more erratas trickle out, with the express purpose of siphoning players from the format to one that makes Konami more money. Even if Edison is fine, from a player perspective, setting that precedent means that you are ceding ground to an organization who does not have your best interests in mind. Look, like, I don't know any easier way, and I'm sorry to anyone who is subscribed to Farfa. I don't know any better example of this than Commander. Community-oriented format, lovingly embraced by Wizards of the Coast once it was clear it made them a shitload of money, totally taken over by the fucking print of 1 million commanders every set, and eventually usurped by the organization, put into a place where it is completely unrecognizable.
I feel like people are just overreacting to this. Because
And again, small changes, very small changes that signal a disrespect that will eventually culminate in usurpation.
just changing them for no reason. See, the thing is, we've just spent like 15 minutes talking about potential reasons, and people like you are just not willing to listen, at which point it's just not really...
People have heard the reasons. They're just not swayed by them. They've heard that it helps judges. They've heard that the format might be fine anyway. Their response to that is, RBET has no problem finding judges, and who cares if the format's good? Maybe. It's good, certainly, today.
worth having a discourse over it. Like, if you're not willing to accept the fact that there are reasons for this, then obviously you're not really going to be worth discussing with, and you're not bringing anything valuable to the table when you're talking about the topic.
You have to entertain my position. You can't say my position's bad. If I have a reason for shitting on your desk, you have to hear me out. You can't wipe it up.
The reason is obvious. It makes things smoother for judges, but it's a reason that massively benefits Konami more so than players. I don't think this is true. I genuinely don't think this is true. I think it benefits new players to Edison format a lot.
New players to Edison format from advanced. Not new players to Edison format from a position of not playing Yu-Gi-Oh! If you view Edison as a fun distraction from advanced or a stepping stone to advanced, this is completely fine. But if you view it as a means and an end in and of itself, it's frustrating.
I think as someone who has played back in the day, I understand all these rules. And
Shabbat Shalom, fine shit. Admittedly, though, it seems like just typical Yu-Gi-Oh! Whining and crying. I want to play best of 2 customs lobbies with pre-nerf MSMC. I can't do that because games move on. Wah, poor me. Seems silly in the context of any other game, no? We just spam crying because it's Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to play tier format forever. Surely my whining about that would be discounted, no? You're in the wrong place. Go back to a different streamer, buddy. Really? Raider. Nimnim, you let these people sit around you? If you want to play tier format forever, you have found your people. That's all I can say. Welcome to the tribe. Come on in. We'll play tier format forever together.
and I think I can play in a Time Wizard format, whatever. But I think someone who only plays modern Yu-Gi-Oh, if they want to try Time Wizard, it's a lot easier now than it was before. Because they can just
do like Shabbat Shalom,
they can rely on the rules that they know from modern Yu-Gi-Oh. They can look up cards in the official database and see the most modern version of the text always, and not guess which was the text at the time of Edison format or GOAT format or whatever, because cards...
Be reasonable. This cuts both ways, right? You buy Retro Pack 2 on shelves now. You put it in your deck. I don't know if this is the real text or not. There is confusion because erratas exist. The solution isn't to adopt one at the expense of the other, especially if one is historically relevant.
Changed multiple times sometimes, and they don't have to worry about not knowing a ruling like priority or does compulse trigger this absolute zero or not.
That's, again, Josh is speaking from the perspective of an advanced player trying to play Edison. He is unable to conceptualize a lapsed Yu-Gi-Oh player who rejoins Edison. Those individuals are not going to be that upset about those. And moreover, I find it hard to believe that a modern player would be so out of their gourd hearing about ignition effect priority that they would drop it.
These kind of things
But
are
again, I'll
definitely
defer
in
to
favor of the
Sunny, who
player.
has met those people.
Erratas are a huge barrier to entry, and the reason I stopped Edison. There you go. It's one example.
I'll say the opposite. Erratas are a huge barrier to entry. That's why I stopped advanced.
But these things are very fixable. I mean, yeah, but like that is one attempt at doing it. Right? That is what they are attempting with this.
Problem in search of a solution.
And I think, like,
The
if
opposite.
people would just
Solution
get
in search
over
of a
this
problem.
initial reaction, because I'm telling you right now, when I saw this yesterday, I had the exact same reaction. My initial gut reaction was the same thing. Why are they doing this? This is stupid. I just want to play Edison the way it was, right?
But then I thought, What if I was contrarian about it?
That was my initial reaction to this. The
Come
more
on,
I
I've
think
done
about
this.
it, though, the more I understand reasons, and the more I'm willing to try this format. And I have tried this format in Master Duel before, and it was still fun. So overall, if people would just get over this initial overreaction and just be like, okay, you know what? I'm willing to play this event. I'm just going to take like Brain Control out of my deck and Goyo Guardian out of my deck and try to make it work without it, and just get used to playing without priority. I think you would still see the point of the format, and you'd still play. You'd still have fun at these events. And
Again, I'm not like. It is very possible that these are still fun. They are going to come at the expense of the existing format, which is already fun.
if people don't like it, then people are going to stop playing in these events, and then they might revert it or whatever. Like, then official Time Wizard is not going to be a thing anymore, and people are just going to...
When has this ever happened, dog? When has people will stop playing it ever resolved anything with Konami? I was told the time rules were going to change any day now because people will vote with their fucking video gaming.
To play...
If people stop showing up to Edison events, you know what they're going to do? We're on Ultimate Time Wizard 2014. And you'll never hear about it again.
with their friends the way they used to, which is also completely fine.
But you can play with your friends the way that you used to, unless you're at an official OTS store, in which case they will lose their accreditation for that.
New mechanical support? Yeah, we'll look at that in a second.
Don't bother.
But yeah, it's okay. The only thing that always annoys me about this kind of stuff, genuinely, and I see this right now again, is the fact that like you guys are actively like not accepting that people can have other opinions. Like you will use any excuse to not accept the fact that maybe someone has a different opinion. Like you will tell me, oh yeah, you're just paid by Konami. You're obviously a Konami influencer and whatever. When I say negative stuff about Yu-Gi-Oh!
First time.
All the time, and I feel like I'm trying to be very calm and have a real discussion about this, and like it's, I don't know, it's weird. It gives me...
He's rolling down the list of everything that everyone does when they're on the wrong side of a 90-10. Everyone's just like so antagonistic towards anyone with an opinion on here, like legitimately. Like, and many of you are coming up with many excuses as to why my opinion is invalid. You know, I'm a Konami shill. I'm wrong. I'm paid by Konami. I'm incorrect. I'm logically flawed. My argument doesn't make sense. I'm in the wrong. It's not right. And that I'm white. And honestly, I'm discounting all of those for the same reason.
Me a weird vibe whenever we have these sort of discussions. Whenever there is something like this, that's why I try to avoid the more dramatic stuff usually, and because it genuinely just bugs me the way people discuss in this community. It's not just this community; it's in general on the internet, right? Like I don't know. I feel like people are not. Yeah. Neil, thank you for 40. Appreciate you.
That's awesome. I'm trying really fucking hard to stay calm, okay? You people are really irritating me. Neil, thanks for the 40. Let me get like a sub and I'll do the same thing.
Hat format enjoyers stay winning. Yeah, I mean, for hat, it doesn't change much, I don't think.
God damn. Fuck all hat players.
All right.
Honestly, like really upsetting seeing what's happening here. Like a totally disingenuous way of arguing. Really frustrating discussion. Polarica, thank you for the sub.
I feel like these changes hurt GOAT more than Edison. What happens in GOAT other than, I mean, Sinister Serpent, and then, okay, Dark Magician of Chaos. Yeah, that's a big one. Sangan doesn't matter in Edison, I don't think.
I guess like you go like, what changes? Then you think about it for like 5 minutes. You're like, fuck. Rescue Cat.
Prio is huge. Yeah, Prio is huge.
Prio's not huge.
For me personally, Prio is the one that I care about the least because I think Prio was always a bad rule. Like, yeah. No, Prio, like, the thing is, the only reason to want to play those formats with Prio is you want it to be exactly the way it was back in the day, which is valid, but at the same time, like, those formats are still going to be playable without Prio, and Prio was stupid to begin with.
Oh, he said Prio, not Brio. Listen, Prio is... I think Prio is fine because the format is balanced around having priority. If I have to sacrifice priority, I will. It's the erratas I can't do. But again, why is the opinion that, like, well, priority was always stupid? Why is that like an obvious assumption? Well, priority was always stupid, so it makes sense to get rid of it. Why?
had changes too. DD Crow is a huge staple and it doesn't negate cards like Atlanteans anymore. Wait, no, Crow negates Atlanteans. If they send an Atlantean for cost with like Undyne and you Crow it doesn't trigger in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. It's like if you Crow a Hieratic Seals or something, or Bestial a Hieratic Seals, it does stop those. So at this point you're just making stuff up. It used to be different in NA and EU. That is true. It used to be different between NA and EU. I don't
That's cool, by the way, that we get to go back to that.
remember which one was which. I believe in EU was where it still would trigger, I think. Yeah, honestly, this sort of that's the kind of things you're mentioning right now is like the exact thing why I think this is actually like what the reason is to make this happen. Because as someone who plays modern Yu-Gi-Oh, you will know this sort of stuff, or you will think you know.
Again, this, I hate to harp on this one. He's imagining a modern player transitioning to Edison, not a lapsed Yugist coming to Edison.
This sort of stuff, but then it just depending on which
developing skills
format you
that
enter,
don't
it just
necessarily
translate
translate to modern.
Like you have no idea when exactly it did
From
this.
the perspective of a modern player who wants to play one Edison event a fortnight, yes, this is a good change. From the perspective of anyone who wants to play Edison, it's not.
Change or did this not change? And so like you have a DD Crow in your hand, your opponent does something, and you don't know whether it's going to work or not. So I think being consistent about this sort of stuff is not a bad thing.
Consistent with modern.
There are reasons doesn't make the format better for the existing Ultimate Time Wizard player base who currently travel to events exclusively for those events. And that's why I'm saying like it is valid for those people to be upset about it. And I'm saying specifically it doesn't affect me as much because I don't do that. Like the people that travel to these tournaments specifically for Ultimate Time Wizard because they want to play Edison format specifically, I can understand why those people are mad. But at the same time, I still think there's going to be a huge chunk of those players that if they were willing to just try this for a bit, like if you just go and try and play this, you're going to find that it still is good.
I mean, based on nothing. Like, I would believe this if he had an argument as to why this wasn't going to fuck things up.
And I think they're going to be fine. Also,
like, the best argument is it might still be okay talking about a format that's already okay.
Oh, the other thing, and that this is an unfortunate truth, is that like these hardcore Time Wizard duelists are essentially making Konami no money.
Well, we got there eventually.
Is the kind of thing you have to realize.
Yep. The goal of this policy to transition Edison players into modern players so they can buy cards on a cycle instead of occasionally purchasing the product specifically designed for them like Retro Pack. 30 minutes in, we've hit it.
My problem is that this is a very arbitrary and becomes a very slippery slope. This is just a new Edison Master Rule, new ban list basically. At that point, why not add a couple new cards or two, change the draw rule, or add take away more stuff? What?
Jesus. Far be it for me to agree with Farfa, but he's right. This is functionally just an Edison ban list. Fuck it, throw some other stuff on the pile. Why not?
No, this is not a slippery slope at all. This just says Time Wizard.
It's a slippery slope insofar as it cedes control of a fundamentally community-created format to Konami. That's the mechanism by which it is a slippery slope. Whether they exercise that control or not, who knows?
Is now consistent with modern Yu-Gi-Oh rules. That's all it does. It's just, you're just making stuff up to be mad. You're just like, oh, now they're changing this. Tomorrow they're gonna ban Raiko or whatever. Like it's just you're just.
Tomorrow they could announce an errata to Raiko that fundamentally changes how it works, and it would have an impact on Edison. You get that, right? Tomorrow they could release an errata for, I don't know, fucking mind control, and it would impact the format. That's the argument.
Just making stuff up.
Today they banned Goyo.
And that's why I'm saying people are overreacting to this.
Dandelion sweating right now. Dandelion, totally iconic card. What if they put on it, those tokens cannot be used for a tribute, link, synchro, summon? Very plausible. Then that card is completely gone from Edison.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it's not the biggest deal in the world, and I think people are going to get over it, and people are either going to decide the format is still worth playing or they won't. But I kind of see where they're coming from.
But like that's the frustrating part, right? They can decide if the format is worth playing or they won't. It's worth playing now. Why risk a good thing, even if it turns out fine? Why risk it?
Future Fusion 2, which is huge. I'm not arguing that it doesn't change the format. It obviously changes the format. Changes are not always terrible, though.
But if you want a changed Edison format, play the format immediately following. You have so many options if you want to play something that isn't Edison.
Future Fusion, for example, is a fucked up powerful card.
If you don't want to play with Future Fusion, there's a million places you can get your fix.
That deserves to be changed. So some of these changes are for the worse, some of these changes are for the better, but it's not like, you know.
But all of the infrastructure surrounding these cards is balanced around them working one way. Even if, like, this errata changes, like, how Future Fusion resolves, so much of the format hinges on it working in a particular manner. Like, you can argue that, like, as Sunny did, that a lot of these individual choices are fine on face. But at the end of the day, you are then playing something that isn't Edison. And if what you like playing is Edison, you are going to play something that likely has a different gameplay experience. Maybe it's not a sufficiently different gameplay experience for you to put it down, but you could always have gotten a different gameplay experience from Edison by playing Tengu, by playing Hat, by playing Teledad. Why is no one doing that? Who knows?
Now you're making it opinion based. I just said changes in general are not good or bad. And as an example, I used Future Fusion, which is not a bad change. I'm not saying it.
It's not an opinion. I said changes can be good or bad, like Future Fusion, which is bad. Wait.
It's good because Future Fusion gets worse. There's cards that I definitely will miss in Edison format, like Go-Yo Guardian. And I said this a bunch of times over the course of the last minute. But I just struggle to see how this is that big of a deal and how it's so hard to understand why they did that. But yeah, I feel like we're not making progress. I think people that want to be negative about this at all costs are going to be negative about this at all costs. And people that are able to be reasoned with will be reasoned with and maybe try the format and maybe still like it or maybe dislike it.
What happens if they don't? What happens if they try the format and they go, this sucks, I want old Edison back? Are they then just unwilling to be reasoned with? Like, is it possible that the people who disagree with you have already gone through the thought process you're currently experiencing, come out the other end unconvinced?
Because I can't really predict what Edison format is going to look like with those changes. All I know is that I still had a ton of fun in the Master Duel ones that had basically been exactly this. And so I think people can still have fun with it. And if people still want to play the old rules with exact same cards, they can still do so outside of the public events.
And you can play Yu-Gi-Oh! By shoving cards up your ass as long as you're not sanctioned. Oh, man. That was really debilitating. And it really did hammer home to me what the actual point of this is, which is a recognition that Edison is becoming the primary and exclusive way that a significant amount of players are engaging with Yu-Gi-Oh! And despite the fact that they are printing products specifically for those people, they are not buying it in sufficient quantities for their investors. So this is meant to ease a transition out of Edison and into Modern, where individuals start buying paper product from Konami more frequently. The reason that it presupposes a player who is familiar with Modern rulings and unable to understand Edison ones is because the Modern player who keeps up with Yu-Gi-Oh! Economically is the only individual Konami cares about. They are not considering the perspective of other people because those people don't make the money. And Edison as a mechanism to pick up lapsed Yugists exists as a transitory step to bringing them into the fold of consumer. That's it. The whole reason. Man, that's rough. And to hear him being like, people going like, man, I think I disagree with you. And he's like, well, then you just can't be reasoned with. Jesus.